All right, gentlemen. First of all, this is a very serious announcement. For those of you who have asked for this, the helping your son succeed in Gemara, so I was having a little trouble with my computer. There have been a few requests. What do you call it? So it's $8, and you can PayPal my Gmail account when I send it to you it's $8 for the file. I had trouble with my computer. It's getting fixed now, and so I should have it within the week for those of you who have requested it. Those of you who have not requested it, you should be requesting it. But those of you who have requested, Be'ezer Hashem will have it for you within the course of the week. Number one. Number two, we're starting on Parsha Chukas now, page 838. And the first thing is, Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe v'Aaron Lemor Zos Chukas HaTorah. This is the law of the Torah. This is the statute of the Torah. And it's always, we're going to spend quite a bit of time just on the concept of the Parah Aduma. First of all, do any of you remember how did Dovid HaMelech die? Anybody know the story? The Gemara says Dovid HaMelech died. The Gemara says that he asked God what day is he going to die on, and eventually God said, I don't tell anybody when they're going to die, and I don't tell them how long, but I could only tell you this is going to be on a Shabbos. So what did Dovid HaMelech do? He studied Torah all day Shabbos, all day, every day of Shabbos, because the angel of death cannot get a person when he's learning Torah. And Dovid HaMelech studied Torah all day Shabbos, and then one Shabbos the angel of death made noise. He created a diversion. He made noise, and Dovid HaMelech went to see what was happening. He thought there was something going on outside. The stair broke, and he died. So the commentaries point out, if you notice at the end of the previous Parsha, if you look at on page 836. On page 836. Aryeh, stand up for 1 second. Thank you. While you're up, could you turn on the air conditioning? Yes. So thank you. So if you look on page 836, the very last words of the Parsha is Velociso olav chet. Thank you. Velociso olav chet barimcha beschelbo bimenu veskoche b'nei Yisrael lo sechalalu velo samusu. Don't desecrate the holies, and you will not die. And look at the very first words of this parsha. This is the law of the Torah. That means when will a person not die? When the person is involved. Chukas Torah. When a person is learning Torah, then a person won't die. That's what. In Dovid HaMelech it says, as long as he was reciting Torah. So everybody asks, well, how did he make Kiddush on Shabbos, and what happened when he went to the bathroom? And I don't have answers for that. But the idea is that Torah protects from the angel of death. So Dovid HaMelech was learning Torah, and we find in the Gemara also that Rabbi Bar Nachmani was also meant to die, and he couldn't die. He just learned Torah until there was a diversion. That's when he died. And Rav Chizda as well was in the Beis Medrash learning Torah all day until he stopped. The angel of death created a diversion. When a person theoretically is learning Torah, he can't be. There are different what he calls in that subject, but that's what the commentaries say. That's what's alluded to over here. It's not the Pashup Shot, obviously. It's a remez. Velo samusu. When will a person not die? Zos chukas Torah. Okay. So we have over here. What do they have to do? Daber el b'nei Yisrael, second line. Zos chukas haTorah shetziva Hashem lemor. Daber el b'nei Yisrael ve'ikho elecha pora aduma tamima. Take a red cow, a perfectly unblemished red cow. Asher ein bo mum, has no blemish. Asher lo aleh lo, and there's no yoke that has been put on the. If they put a yoke on the pora aduma. So then the Parah Aduma, if it had a yoke on its back at any point, it is disqualified from being a Parah Aduma. There's even a medrash that says that there was a non-Jew who had a Parah Aduma, and the sages came to him, and he said he has this beautiful red cow, and it was a perfectly unblemished red cow. Even 2 black hairs on the Parah Aduma disqualify it. So they inspected the Parah Aduma, and they offered the guy, I think they offered, I forgot what it was. They offered him one coin, one amount of money, and he declined it because he knew that they'd up the price. He upped the price to 1,000 zuz, an exorbitant price. So they said okay, and they agreed to it. The next day they were coming to buy the Parah Aduma and give him the money. And what happened was, overnight he said to his friend, listen, I'm going to pull one on these Jews. And he put a yoke on the Parah Aduma, and the Parah Aduma with this yoke all night. Now that disqualifies it. The sages had a tradition that there are 2 hairs on the Parah Aduma's neck. That once a yoke goes on a Parah Aduma, these hairs will bend down, they will no longer stand up straight. So first they inspected it and it was perfect. The next day, when they came to give him the 1,000 zuz, they said to him, well, we just want to do one last inspection. And they did the inspection, and they saw these 2 hairs that were now leaning down because he put a yoke on it overnight in order to laugh at the Jews. And they said, "Oh, sorry, joke, yoke's on you, huh? Because we're not paying you because now this thing is disqualified." So he then said to his friend, "The Jews got the best of me," and then he went and he hung himself. That was he. Yeah, I knew, John. I knew you'd love that story. So he went and he hung himself, and he was despondent because he lost 1,000. He lost 1,000. It was I was waiting for that reaction. Well, boy, that was great. The what do you call it? So okay. That is the rule. Now there's a tremendous amount over. Hold all the questions, hold all the comments and questions for a few minutes because there's a tremendous amount over here. First of all, Rashi brings down later. We're not going to read the Rashi inside. What's the difference? What happened? A guy becomes tameh, what's called tumas meis. The guy becomes impure, came into contact with a dead body. Whether it's a physical contact, you're under the same roof. There's only one way a person can get out of that state of impurity, and that's if they go through the ritual with the para aduma, which means they have to take this red cow. It's got to be a perfectly red cow, and then they got to burn it up. They got to shecht it, burn it up, mix it with water, sprinkle it on the guy, and then he becomes no longer tameh. He goes through the 3rd day, the 7th day. There's a whole procedure over here to get out of the tumah. And at the end of the day, the question becomes, really, a red cow, the guy became tameh, and the only way to get out is a red cow, and the whole thing doesn't make any sense. Not that makes sense. By human logic, there's no understanding here. There's no understanding human logic. What's a red cow got to do with any of this? So it's funny because somebody once said to me that why is it in the morning when you wash negelwasser, you wash 3 times on each hand? For what reason? What are we trying to do? We're trying to remove something. What are we removing? What's called the ruach ra. So somebody said to me, why does it have to be 3 times alternating it? Why can't it be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3? So I said to the guy, I said, that's all that's bothering you over here? That there's a ruach ra you're okay with. That you have no problem that there's a ruach ra. Your only problem, your only issue here is that getting rid of it, that's the only part that doesn't make sense to you over here? If you believe the people who've told you there's a ruach ra, so you could believe them when they tell you how to get rid of the ruach ra. It's an all or nothing proposition here. It's not like, oh yeah, ruach ra, yeah, I'm good with. But there, so the para aduma, that doesn't make it. Oh, and tumas meis makes sense to you to become tameh. That does make sense. The person becomes ritual impurity. That does make sense. So there is a connection because we know that there is ritual impurity. We even spoke about that. Why a person becomes tameh with a mace? Why is the mace the highest form of tameh? Because death threatens our fundamental belief in the afterlife. A person could be a very, very strong believer in the afterlife. We believe in the afterlife. We believe in the afterlife till a person, chas v'shalom, faces death. Death is like, whoa, that doesn't look like any afterlife to me. And it's very threatening to a person's belief system, and therefore the deceased have to be buried as quickly as possible, a severe form of tumah so that we get away from it as soon as possible, so that we could restore our belief, which is threatened. And therefore, that's tameh meis, a dead body, a dead Jewish body specifically, has the highest level of tumah. A dead Jewish body is the highest level of ritual impurity because that threatens that's the one thing that could threaten the entire belief system. Person believes till something sees a dead body. Like, what, really? There is an afterlife? Doesn't look like there's any life at all. And therefore, the deceased is removed as soon as possible, buried as soon as possible to get it out of sight. I don't want to use it out of sight, out of mind, but that is what it is. Try to get it out of our consciousness in order to be able to refocus and with a fundamental belief. So Rashi here, later on, hold all the question comments just for a few minutes. Rashi later on will tell us what's the connection between the para aduma and death. And Rashi says later on, the idea is that he brings the analogy of a maidservant a servant comes to the king, and she's carrying her child. And the child soils himself, and soils the floor right in front of the king. Who's supposed to clean it up? Says the Gemara. The mother has to come along and clean up what her child did. What was the ultimate sin of the Jewish people? Was the golden calf. Right, the golden calf. Now, before the golden calf, when they got to Har Sinai, so everybody knows that the Jewish people actually got to the state of Adam before the original sin, which means there was no more death in the world. What brought death back to the world? The sin of the golden calf. There's a whole discussion about what it means there was no death in the world. But whatever it means that there was no death in the world, what restored it? The sin of the golden calf. Now the Gemara says there are 7 different levels of gold, none of which I have. But the Gemara says, maybe soon. But the Gemara says there are 7 different levels of gold, and the highest form of gold is what's called red gold. But they even have what they call white gold. Don't they have yellow gold, white gold? They're different grades of gold. The highest form of red gold, which is what was used in the golden calf, is what's called red gold. So the red gold for the golden calf, the calf that brought that death back to the world. So who should clean up the mess made by the baby calf? Should be the mother, which is a cow. So what's the mother? The mother is the red cow. So the red cow, which symbolizes red gold is always a symbol of sin as well, right? The red is always an idea of people getting overly excited about things that they shouldn't be, and therefore the red is the mother has to come along and clean up. Therefore, death, which was reinstated by the baby, by the calf, the red gold calf, is going to be removed by the red mother, the cow. That's the basic connection. But at the end of the day, Shlomo HaMelech says, Amarti echkema v'hirechoka mimeni. Shlomo HaMelech says, I said I would be wise, and I see that I'm far removed from achieving wisdom. Amarti echkema v'hirechoka mimeni. Why? Because there's one mitzvah Shlomo HaMelech didn't understand. Which one? Parah Aduma. What didn't he understand about it? Not the fact that it cleanses the death. What he didn't understand is how could it be that the Parah Aduma, it purifies the guy who was tameh, yet the person who sprinkles on him, he himself becomes tameh. So Shlomo HaMelech, hold all the questions and comments for a few minutes. Shlomo HaMelech, he said, Amarti echkema v'hirechoka mimeni. I said I become wise and it's distant. So first of all, you see, there are 613 mitzvahs, right? Shlomo HaMelech understood 612 of them. One of them he didn't understand, and Shlomo HaMelech says, Amarti echkema v'hirechoka. I'm distant from wisdom, from achieving wisdom. That means if you don't understand one mitzvah in the Torah, that means you're far distant from achieving perfect wisdom. You know why? Because every mitzvah itself contains infinite wisdom. So you've got 612 parts of infinity, but you're missing one part of infinity, which means you've got nothing of infinity, because it's infinite. So Amarti, because he didn't understand one aspect of the mitzvah, so Shlomo HaMelech says, I don't understand it. Amarti echkema v'hirechoka mimeni. It's distant from me. I don't understand the mitzvah. That's what the Parah Aduma is. It's the ultimate mitzvah that is this example of something beyond human comprehension. Now take a look at the first Rashi here. Zos Chukas Torah. Okay? Zos Chukas Torah. Says Rashi. Say 838, first Rashi. Lefisha hasatan ve'umos ha'olam monin es Yisrael. The Satan in the nations of the world, they kind of, for monin, a different word to translate. Probably they criticize or they mock. Probably mock is the best word. They mock the Jewish people. Lamor, ma mitzvah zosu, ma tam yeshba. What is this mitzvah? And what idea is behind it? Lefichach kosav b'chuka. Therefore, it says it's a chok. It's a decree from Hashem. You have no right to question it. In other words, people laugh at us. What's with the Parah Aduma? What a joke. What, this you really think works? Do you think that really matters? Zos Chukas Torah. It is a statute. A statute means we don't understand it. Like we don't understand. It's a decree, and it might not make sense. Now, just 1 second, gentlemen. I want you to turn for a second to Parsha's Dvarim. Take a look at Sefer Dvarim, Perek Daled Pasuk Vav. Keep the place over here. Go to Dvarim Daled Vav. You see a little bit of a contradiction here. Because on page Daled Vav, it's on page 960. Thank you, Mordechai. Good to have you back. On page 960. It says, take a look, 6 lines from the top on page 960. Last word on the line. It says, Ushmartem va'asisam, you should keep it and you should do it. Ki hi chochmaschem ubinaschem le'ne'am, it's your wisdom and your intelligence in the eyes of the nations. Asher yishmun es kol hachukim, the nations hear all these laws. They're just wise, this nation, just a bunch of smart Jews. That's what the nations are going to. They're going to see our laws. They're going to say, "Oh, what a bunch of smart Jews." Always sit next to the Jew on a test, right? Except if it's math, you sit next to the Chinese guy. But always sit next to the Jew. And if it's spelling, you sit next to the Indian, right? The Indians always win the spelling bees, right? I think they got a head start because they know how to spell their own last names. There's always a GHK combination in there somewhere. If you can spell that, you can spell anything. You can certainly spell Mississippi if you can spell an Indian name. But they what do you call? So they're what do you call? So what does it say over here? It says, hey, our wisdom, our statutes and our laws are going to be the wisdom. The nations are going to be impressed by our wisdom. What does it say over here? It says they're going to be mocking us for our laws. Well, make up your mind which is. They're going to mock us or they're going to be impressed. Which one's it going to be? You know what the answer is? The answer, gentlemen, is every one of you. That means in the beginning they'll laugh at us. But in the end they see results. They see what the Jewish people have become. Oh, you're laughing. Ha ha ha. Oh. Right? I'm sure that everybody laughed at Jeff Bezos. I'm sure there were people who mocked him when he said he's got an idea to send books. Right? They started out with books, right? Amazon started out with books. I'm sure somebody laughed at him. He's selling books out of a garage. And now those people laughing at him, they're working for him now. Right? They're working, or they've certainly bought his products. Right? They certainly work. There's like nobody. I'm sure Bill Gates was laughed at. Anybody who succeeded in life was laughed at. There were always naysayers. That's as far as the world at large, right? What about guys who become Baalei Teshuvos? What kind of mockery do they go through? Where people laugh at them. What are you, out of your mind? It's a cult and they're going to brainwash you, right? Which is true. And what do you call it? How we certainly try anyway, And what do you call it? They're feeding you a line, and you're going to be poor, and you're going to be broke, and you're going to study Torah, and you're not going to have a parnassa, and how are you ever going to get married, and how are you ever going to the whole way, and a bunch of extremists, and they throw stones, and what do you got? And they're intolerant, and what do you call it? They're intolerant, and they're judgmental, and they're toxic, and they're what do you call it? They're just everything negative. The worst people in the world. Religious Jews, just horrific, just the worst people in the world, and everybody goes through just everything, and you're going to have a shtreimel, right? And what's about your Jewish name, and all the wedding, and what's Aunt Hilda going to say? Who cares? But okay, I don't even have an Aunt Hilda. What? And everybody's worried about. And then in the end, all of a sudden they say, hey, this guy didn't starve to death. He married a nice girl. Sometimes even got himself a sugar daddy. Right, and he, what do you call it? Yeah, sometimes it happens. And our rich father-in-laws once in a while, And what do you call it? And he got himself, and he learns Torah. He's got nice little kids, and he's got a family. He's got a life. He's got a purpose. And all of a sudden, they're not laughing anymore. And you know how many often this has happened that people have come around? I want to tell you. You want to hear a great moment? Oh, you're gonna love this. I was once doing there was an Arachim seminar. This Arachim a weekend. Arachim is the Israeli outreach organization, so they were trying to put together an English program, which they kind of never really got. So they did a weekend. This is going back about 20 years. They did this weekend. So the theme of the weekend I was supposed to speak about a kollel life. Right? I'm supposed to speak about a kollel life. Say, just picture a black guy going in and speaking to a Ku Klux Klan meeting. That's what that's how the people were looking at me. And so there's one guy in the back. There's a crusty guy with a knitted yarmulke in the back, and he keeps raising his hand. I was taking questions. This guy's raising his hand. I don't like the look on his face, and I'm trying to ignore him. And this crusty-looking guy, all of a sudden he goes, "Hey, come on! I've been waiting to say something all night. I'd like to say something. I couldn't avoid it." He says, "I want to tell you, I got 3 sons. My one son's an accountant. My second son's a dentist, and my third son learns at kollel." I go, "Okay, here it comes. Blast away. And I want to tell you something. I have more nachas from my son who learns at kollel than a whole bunch of them put together." It was like a dream moment. I stood aside. I said, "Sir, would you like to come up and give this lecture, please?" Satisfaction, joy. See, there's no real translation. It means satisfaction, joy, and money all rolled into one, without the money. So nachas means satisfaction from your family. It means when your kids come to your house and they're still willing to talk to you, they're not waiting for you to die so they can inherit the money, and they love you for who you are as opposed to what they could get out of you. That's nachas. And when your grandchildren come to you on Shabbos, and they sit at a Shabbos table with you, they sing with you, and they spill on their parents instead of on you, that's nachas, right? That's the ultimate nachas, right? Hey, those are my kids, they deserve it. Hey kids, you did it to me, let your kids do it to you. That's nachas. Nachas, and it's countless people. So this is only a projection for every individual. They're going to laugh at you in the beginning, so they laugh. And all the people after you, you see them 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line, half of them are empty, half of them don't have a family, half of them are what do you call it? It's like this from Yeshiva guy goes in to see a doctor. True story, a from Yeshiva guy. Really, like Mir, Brisk, one of these guys. So he goes in to see the doctor, and there's a lady there in front of him. Lady goes in, and the lady comes out. And then he goes in, and the doctor says, hey, do you know who that was? He goes, no, I didn't even. Tried not even to look at her. He goes, you don't know who that was? He goes, no, clueless. So he tips the name. It's some famous actress or something. He goes, you never heard of her? He goes, no. Doctor says, hey, I looked on your file. You're engaged to get married? You're getting married soon? Kid's 21. You're getting married soon? He goes, yeah. He goes, you don't know how are you prepared for life to get married? How can you get married? Shiva guy. He says, can I ask you a question? He says, yeah. He says, what number marriage are you on, Doc? He goes, on my fourth. Okay, checkmate. All right, all of a sudden you got it all worked out, huh? All of a sudden you got it all worked out. That's the first lesson here. The second lesson here is a lesson for Moshe Feinstein. And Moshe Feinstein says, "Zos Chukas Torah." Now, pay attention carefully. Moshe Feinstein says, "Why is the Parah Aduma? Why is Parah Aduma called the statute of the Torah? It should say, theoretically, it should say Zos Chukas HaParah. This is the statute of the Parah. Why does it say Zos Chukas HaTorah? This is the chukah of the Torah." So Moshe Feinstein says that what Shlomo HaMelech didn't understand was the paradox. The paradox that it works to make this guy tahor, but it doesn't, the guy who did it makes him tameh. That's the internal paradox of the Parah Aduma. So Moshe Feinstein says that's why it's called Chukas HaTorah. Why? Because we all have character traits. There are certain traits in the Torah that a person has. Let's take humility. For a person himself should try to be humble. But when it comes to other people, you have to honor them. Here's the paradox. Oh, by the way, isn't haughtiness a sin? It's sinful to be haughty, right? So why are you allowed to honor other people? Aren't you putting a stumbling block in front of them? Good question, right? Good question. What do you say, Miguel? Good question, right? Why can you honor other people? You're putting a stumbling block in front of you. You honor other people, the guy's going to be haughty. The guy's going to become a balgaiva. Huh?
He doesn't necessarily have to accept it.
Yeah, but if you put a cheeseburger in front of a hungry man, he also doesn't have to accept it, but you're transgressing lifnei velociso michshol. If somebody says to you, boy, I'm depressed, I want to kill myself, and you put an AK-47 in front of him, you're also around lifnei velociso michshol. Right? So he doesn't have to accept it, but on the other hand, but you're not allowed to feed it to him. So why isn't that lifnei velociso michshol? There's a what do you call it? You're putting a stumbling block in front of a blind man. Why are you allowed to give people honor? The guy's going to become haughty.
Because Hashem says so.
Because Hashem said that's always the fallback position. I said to my kid, my kid was about 4 years old. I said, do you want me to pot you? He said, you can't. I said, well, why not? He said, Hashem doesn't let. He became a big believer suddenly. You can always fall back on Hashem said so. That's always a good one. Why? Hashem said so. Right? Why'd you take the pie that was in the freezer for Shabbos? Hashem said so. Oh yeah, Hashem said you're eating tuna fish. Yeah. Okay. So Hashem, yeah, you can always invoke Hashem, right? Why are you allowed to honor people? Let me ask you a question. Let's say I owe you $20. I borrowed $20 from you. And you come over to me and say, give me back, I want you to pay me, and it's a due date, January 1st. You say, give me back the $20 you owe me, I want to buy drugs. I want to buy illegal drugs. Am I allowed to give you back the money?
Yes. Allowed?
Speak, Mayor. Speak. Am I allowed? I'm not allowed. I have to give you back the money. I owe you the money. It's not my money. I can't keep the money. That's up to you what you do with it. I can't, if you say, hey, can I borrow $20? I want to buy some ecstasy. No, then I can't lend you $20. But if I owe you money, I have to give it back to you. You do what you want with it. I owe you the honor that you owe to other people. What you do with it is your business. But I owe that to you. And you have to honor other people. That's what Moshe Feinstein says. Humility for yourself, you should run away from honor. But for other people, you make every effort you can to honor them. Same thing with generosity. When it comes to yourself, you have to try to be as not excessive with your own thing. You have to try to restrain. We have to try to restrain our needs. But for other people, we have to be as generous as we possibly realistically could be, and so on and so forth. So, for example, if there are certain people who, for yourself, you might not need a booklet like how to run the Shabbos table, right? But for other people, maybe you should buy it for them, right? And by the way, if you do, you can become the millionth customer. You can become the millionth customer to buy this book. All we need is another 998,100, something like that. But you could, why not become the millionth customer? So a person has to know that Zos Chukas Torah means it could go in both directions.
How much, Rabbi?
And the chukah of the Torah is that's what we're learning. What's that?
I was asking, how much is the book?
The book is $14, two for $37. But the what do you call if a person understands that Zos Chukas Torah, this is the statute of the Torah, that the Torah, our whole life is a paradox. Our whole life is a paradox. We constantly have to turn it on and turn it off, which we've spoken about. Now, take a look a little further. Let me just find the location here. Take a look at Perek Lamed Aleph Pasuk Chafaf. Somebody had a question. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Sorry. So is it like it has to be like a separation of responsibility? So people need honor and they need humility, but it's better that they be the ones to provide themselves with humility, and it's better for other people to.
Not better. It's mandatory. For ourselves, we have to. Don't work on other people's humility. Work on your own. We have to work on our own humility. It's like bitachon. It's like trust. You know, if a person, there's a concept. I get you 1 second, Marty. There's a concept called Gamzu Latova. What does Gamzu Latova mean? When something happens, we have to say it's all for the best. You don't say that to somebody else, right? If you bend down to pick up a pencil and you smack your head on the table on the way up, so to yourself you say Gamzu Latova. If somebody else smacks their head on the table, you don't say Gamzu Latova, right? Because then they'll hit you with a stender and say Gamzu Latova, right? And then you have a Gamzu Latova fight, right? You know, and everybody out Gamzu. You know, don't be faith on somebody. For somebody else, that's why, ironically, when it comes to making my own parnasa, person has to make a livelihood, you don't do over what we call hishtadlus, the responsible effort, not more. But when it comes to helping other people financially, you got to go. You can stay up all night long to help other people. When it comes to somebody else's needs, there's no limit to taking care of how much time we should be putting into other people's needs. In our own needs, we have to have the faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'll do what I have to do, what's considered responsible, and let HaKadosh Baruch Hu take care of the rest. But when it comes to somebody else's stuff, that there's no limit. There's no bitachon. I'll have faith on behalf of somebody else. That there's no such thing. When it's somebody else, we should see it as if it's totally in our hands. And that effort that we put in, that becomes the merit that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees our effort, and therefore He brings bracha. We shouldn't convince ourselves that it's because of what we did, but that becomes our obligation. That's why you have this contradiction, this paradox. Yeah, what was I going to ask? Mordechai, go ahead.
My question was about, it was going back when we said about death.
Yes.
We do bury the person as soon as possible, but why then would we mourn them for a year? I know mourning is healthy, but
good. It's a good question. Part of the idea is to focus on. It's like a person sits shiva, right? Why does a person sit shiva? We're trying to get the dead person out of it. So there's a psychological, the emotional, psychological. But part of the idea is that we should be reminding ourselves that ultimately a person dies, and that's a reminder to ourselves that we got to get on the bicycle and get moving. Right, so there is there's obviously the emotional. You see how the Torah, how the Torah is so into the Torah. It has such an insight into human nature. By others, they have what's called viewing. Don't they have awake and viewing and that sort of thing? And they keep the body out for 3 days. The mourning, we don't even comfort a mourner until the burial, until after the burial, until the body is buried. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that says that when don't comfort your fellow while his mourner is around. Don't calm somebody down when he's angry. Don't try calming somebody down when he's angry. And don't go and try to comfort a mourner until the body, if the deceased is still there. Why not? Because they're not ready to be comforted at that point. They're not ready to be comforted at that point. And comforting itself, the Gemara says, you don't comfort with verbal, you don't say something to comfort people. How do you comfort people? You comfort people just by going there. People always ask, a person has to go to a mourner's house, they say, what am I supposed to say? You don't say anything. Gemara says you don't say anything unless he talks to you. You don't talk to him at all. You don't say anything. You know why? What can you possibly say? How can we possibly say to a guy who just suffered a loss, other than the wrong things? Like, oh, that's not so bad. You should hear what happened to so-and-so. That doesn't comfort anybody. That's called insensitivity. So what do you go there for? All you're going there is to show the person's not alone. That's all you're going there for, to show the person's not alone. There's nothing to say. It's just to show, because a person who suffers a loss in any situation, when a person suffers a loss, it could be a financial loss also, part of the pain is that the person feels they're all alone. That's part of the pain. That's why the Gemara says, remember we spoke about this? Remember when I told you when you got in trouble in school and you got thrown in the principal's office and you're just stewing there till the door opens up and they throw in your friend. Jeff gets tossed into your office too. And all of a sudden you feel better. And you're joking around and the confidence is oozing now. Right? Why? So the Gemara says, Soras rabim chatzi nechama. When there's a communal suffering, that's half of the comfort. Why should it matter? The stock market, if a person loses his money in the stock market, is despondent. When he finds out that the market crashed and everybody, a few guys got wiped out, so then it's not so bad. Why? Why? The answer is because you don't feel so alone. And that's half of the comfort, the Gemara says. And that's why you comfort the mourner. And so the idea of death, sitting Shiva, and then is the Torah says, first of all, get the body out of sight. Then the healing could begin. Then the healing begins. It doesn't even begin when they're viewing and they have a wake and they're drinking booze. Then it doesn't even begin at that point. It's only afterwards that the healing, after the body is buried, then the person could, up until the point, therefore you don't comfort somebody at that moment. The same thing, by the way, when a person is angry, you don't comfort somebody, you don't calm somebody down when they're angry. You know why? You know why? Somebody say, okay, Frank, take it easy, Frank. Just relax. It's not so bad. You know why? Because that only gets people angrier. Why? Because if I'm upset about something, who are you to tell me not to be upset about it? That just gets me more upset. How do you like being told not to be upset when I tell you not to be upset? Everybody, there's sometimes you got the guy who yells loudest in the house, and somebody else is like, come on, everybody, just calm down. Oh, come on, you're a walking volcano. You're telling everybody else to calm down. All of a sudden, you're telling everybody else to calm down because it doesn't bother you. That's more irritating than anything. You wait till a person calms down. That's what it says. Now, 1 second. Turn to Perek Lamed Aleph Pasuk Chaf Aleph, 31:21. 31:21. Lamed Aleph Chaf Aleph. And here it says, 30. What page?
1098.
No.
906. Oh, we're not. Oh, I was in the bar.
It happens. 31:21. Okay. Now this is in Parshas Matos, Chaf Aleph Lamed Aleph. Lamed Aleph Chaf Aleph. This is in Parshas Matos. And this is talking about when the Jewish people come back from war against the Midianites. And they've brought back all sorts of utensils that were used by the non-Jews. And now the Torah goes into the koshering process. You see that, page 906, about 10 lines from the top. Vayomer Elazar HaKohen el Anshe HaTzova, there's Elazar, the son of Aaron, Haboim LaMelchama. Now look at the next sentence. Zos Chukas HaTorah. Sound familiar? Those three words sound familiar? Exactly at the beginning of our Parsha right here. Zos Chukas HaTorah. Same exact word. Zos Chukas HaTorah, Zos Chukas HaTorah. The Torah says, Zos Chukas HaTorah, Asher Tziva Hashem as Moshe. And then he tells you how to kasher things. And he goes on and he says to you, skip down one pasuk. Kol davar asher yovo ba'esh, anything that was used roasting, used the metal spits for roasting. It was roasted in open fire, and it absorbed pork or non-slaughtered animals. Treif, what we call treif. Ta'aviru ba'esh. You gotta kasher it by putting it in the equal and opposite, in the equal heat. You gotta kasher, what's that? Libun. You gotta put it in and you gotta heat it. And then it says anything that was used for cooking, so you gotta put it in hot water. Why? Because when something becomes treif, so it absorbs the non-kosher material into it, and the only way to get it out is with the heat, the same level heat burns out whatever, so however it was absorbed. Okay, is that logical, gentlemen? Is that logical? Does that make logical sense?
More than the
Yeah, it makes perfect logical sense, as a matter of fact. See, I intimidated you. I asked you a question, I asked it cynically, so you guys got all nervous. There's all of you and only one of me. What could I possibly do to you if you're wrong? Yeah, well, what are you afraid of? What could I possibly do? And you all backed off. Right? So is it logical? It's 100% logical. It's the most logical law in the Torah. The most logical law in the Torah is that something that's hot and it got absorbed with a certain heat, you need the same level of heat to get it out. If it was cooked hot, so you need hot water. You don't need to put it in a spit. Perfectly logical. What does it say when introducing it? Zos Chukas Torah. This is the statute of the Torah. What does it say by the, is paraduma logical? Is paraduma logical?
No.
Buck. No, it's not logical at all. Part of the least, part of the one that we don't understand. Shlomo HaMelech didn't understand it. So you have an example of one mitzvah which is completely beyond human comprehension and logic. You have another mitzvah which is perfectly logical, and both are introduced the same way. With what? Zos Chukas HaTorah. Says Reb Moshe Feinstein, that's teaching us obviously that keeping, obeying, fulfilling the laws of the Torah has absolutely nothing to do with human logic. You do it because, there you go, finally got to say it. Right? Hashem said so. There we go. Now you get to say Hashem said so. That's why we do it. It makes sense. It doesn't make sense. Certain things do make sense. Certain things don't make sense. I want to tell you something. Does tzedakah make sense? Honestly, does tzedakah? No, it does not make sense. Why should I work and give you money? Get a job, broski, right? Why should I gotta work and go get a job? Why should I give you? You're right, that's what the word means. But there shouldn't be a word like that. Why should I work and you're a freeloader? I gotta give you. Yeah, the answer is that it works because Hashem said that it makes sense. To a human, why should I work? I mean, this is where what do you call it? Yeah, you work, I work, everybody get a job. I got to work and give you my money? What sense does that make? Bad enough I got to pay 10%, I got to pay taxes to the government. Right? So what I got to give to? The answer is that it has nothing to do with logic. It's not logical. It may be intuitive, and it is intuitive, and Noachides are taken to task for not being charitable, even though it's not one of the 7 Noachide laws. That's why Sodom was destroyed. Because the idea of capitalism, where Ronald Reagan said, well, let them pull themselves up by their bootstraps, right? Yeah, but they didn't even have bootstraps to pull themselves up with, right? Capitalism, which sounds very fancy, is what we call Sodom, right? I'm not going to worry about you. I'll worry about myself. You worry about you. I'll worry about me. Well, that's fair. No, that's not fair. That's Sodom. And therefore, it doesn't have to be make logical sense. It is intuitive, though, and therefore Noachides are taken to task for it. Yet here the Torah says, whether you understand it and whether you don't understand it, either way you got to do it. It's those Chukas Torah. That's why sometimes people make their observance contingent on their understanding. If I understand it, I'll do it. If I don't understand it, I won't do it. Well, I got news for you. If you want to not, if that's what, you may as well quit now, because I'll give you a whole bunch of things that you're never going to understand. For one example, to have to pay $80 for a yellow piece of fruit on Chukas, after all the philosophical explanation, there's still a yellow fruit. And then when you bring it home and find one dot, you found out that you just wasted $80. It's not even worth the 80. It's not even worth that. That does not make sense to me. I got news for you. That's not logical. Who said it has to be logical? Who says everything has to be logical? And when your kid falls down and he bumps his knee on the floor, and everybody, come here, I'll kiss the boo-boo. And the father says, hey, come on. That doesn't make sense. You know that doesn't work. And it doesn't work. Kissing a boo-boo doesn't help, right? It does not. Kissing a boo-boo does not remove any pain. Who says it has to be logical? Who says everything has to be logical? And therefore we say, hey, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us a Torah. Zos Chukas Torah. It makes sense to you? Good. It doesn't make sense to you? That's also good. Didn't your mothers ever tell you, if you're going to do it with a smile? You ever hear that music from your mother? If you're going to do it with a smile. They ask you to do something, you're grumbling. If you're going to do it happily. Do it with a smile. You never heard that from your parents? Our mothers say that all the time. I never said that. I said, you want to do it with a smile, do it with a smile. You want to do it grumbly, do it grumbly, but you're going to have to fold the laundry. I don't care if you're happy about it or not. I'm not that happy about it either, right? Go do the laundry. When I used to pay Pesach, my mother would say, my job in the house, I had to go upstairs, Erev Pesach, and I had to clean out, we had a shower room. My mother would send me up on Erev Pesach to go scrape out the shower room, clean out the shower room. So every year was the same thing. Mom, nobody eats in the shower room. Nobody eats while they're taking a shower. And my father would yell, don't get smart. Do what your mother said. My father wasn't happy either. He was scraping out the other bathroom. Neither of us was happy about this. Right? So you want to do it, do it. You want to happily or not happily. You're going to have to do it. That's the way it goes. That's what the Torah is telling you over here. Okay, now one more point. There's a Gemara that says, yeah, go ahead.
I was just wondering, kind of, what's the difference between accepting the mitzvot even if you don't understand them, and even if no one, even the greatest sages, understand them, and what's the difference between that and unquestioned blind faith to Hashem?
I don't know what unquestioned blind faith means. Unquestioned blind faith means, the expression of blind faith did not come down from Sinai. So I don't know, people throw that around all the time. I don't know what blind faith means. Our blind faith is not blind because we have enough evidence to that what we're doing makes a lot of sense. Those things that don't make sense, just because I don't understand it doesn't mean it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me. So, in not being the greatest intellect since the time of creation doesn't mean that I have to, therefore, and if I don't understand it, then it doesn't count, which is the mistake many people make. Many people feel, if I don't understand it, then it can't be. Well, that's not true. A 4-year-old can't possibly understand how an airplane stays up in the air. It doesn't understand the first thing about a jet engine. But the fact is that it does. The fact is that it does, just because we don't understand it. So we have a limited capacity of understanding. So what? Therefore it's not true. And therefore a person has to know. That's a good question. We are supposed to try to understand as deep as we can. We're supposed to try to comprehend and go as deep as we can to fathom the logic behind the mitzvahs and the understanding of the Torah. That's what we do when we're learning Gemara. But it's not a prerequisite. Not a prerequisite for my faith. My faith is there because the rest of the system makes a tremendous amount of sense. So you didn't understand this detail. So what? And when you go to a doctor and he gives you antibiotic, you know why antibiotic works? Do you have any idea why antibiotic works? I still don't understand how the antibiotic knows to go to my toe. Right? But somehow it does. And the doctor said, take it. I believe you. As long as you know how a pain reliever works? I don't know how pain relievers work, but I like them. It works. It works, and a double dose works better. So, okay, there we go. So that's okay. So tomorrow we're going to talk about Dama ben Nesina, Mirz Hashem.